Welcome to the Say It Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Vasavi Kumar. If you're eager to gain clarity, speak with unwavering confidence, and liberate those inner voices, you're in the perfect spot. My mission here is to empower you to break free, find fulfillment, and ignite your passion. You ready? It's time to say it out loud. I've put together a guide of my top 10 tested and proven to work practical strategies and habits to help bright women like you say no, set your boundaries right, live confidently, and build healthy relationships, starting with the relationship you have with yourself. This is a self-paced guide, and I can't wait for you to dig into it so you can start becoming your most confident self, because she's in there waiting for you. Head to the link in my show notes or go to vasavikumar.com/guide and grab it today. Welcome back to another episode of the Say It Out Loud podcast. I have a very special treat again for you today. I love sharing the interviews that I do on other people's podcasts. It's just a different vibe. It's very different when I am recording a solo episode or when I'm interviewing someone versus someone is interviewing me. So I wanted to share this with you for anyone who is in recovery, for anyone who has relapsed in recovery and you're feeling shame around it. That's what this topic is all about today. And even if you're not in recovery, but you live with debilitating shame, then this episode is for you. Because regardless of where you're at on your journey, you're in recovery, you're not in recovery, shame is something that I think we can all come together on to agree that we've all experienced it in some shape or form in our life. And that's exactly what we're going to get deep into on today's episode, where I was interviewed on the Stack and Days podcast. It's called the Stack and Days podcast, hosted by Raymond. Raymond was an amazing interviewer. He asked all the right questions to really go deep, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. So I'm going to now go ahead and play the interview from me on the Stack and Days podcast. I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stack and Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety, growth, and well-being. I'm your host, Ray Donovan. And today I'm really excited for the guest that we have joining us. She wears many hats that hopefully we can get into most of them, but some of which are author, podcaster, TV host, individual and group coach, therapist, entrepreneur, lifestyle expert. And I'm really excited today because she's written this book that I just finished recently. And I think it could really lend to giving us some tools to really speak our truth and speak it out loud. So with that being said, Ed, I don't want to do any more wrong to the introduction, but Vasavi Kumar is here to join us. Welcome to the Stack and Days podcast.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I want to get right into it because I feel like there's a lot that I want to cover. So for those of you those who are listening who don't know you, you obviously have your own journey of recovery that I want to kind of start this with. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the conversation I want to gear towards saying it out loud. I think that there's so many nuggets of knowledge that you can share with the broader community here about trying to tap into their unspoken gifts and their truth selves that I really want to get into. But before we do that, let's kind of just go all the way back to the beginning of your story with alcohol. What did that relationship look like? And we can kind of just transition from there.
So I had my first drink when I was 12 years old. It was a White Russian. Right. I had many White Russians that night, but it was a family function. It was an Indian gathering. I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants. I'm first generation, and we were in Queens, New York, where I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and we had gone to some party, and the bartender gave me some attention. Yeah. He gave me some attention. I was 12. I was budding. I was becoming a young adult, and he gave me some attention. And he asked me if I wanted a drink. And I knew I should have said no because I didn't come from a family of drinkers. Neither of my parents drink or anything like that. But I said yes because I really loved the attention. And so I said yes, and he made me a White Russian. And that was my first experience with alcohol, and I loved it. I loved the way it made me feel. I loved how loose I felt. I had that liquid courage. I was just kind of very free in my mind. And I really enjoyed it. And that was the very beginning. It didn't become a problem it wasn't a problem like you would see in like the movies and stuff, it didn't become a problem, but my life became unmanageable in my 30s after I had got divorced, and I started dating somebody much younger than me who had a drug problem. And then I started using drugs also. I started using cocaine heavily. And alcohol was just kind of on the side. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, personally, I could not use cocaine without drinking alcohol because I just felt like I was tweaking. But for me, when I went to rehab, it was more so for the cocaine, but I knew I had to give up everything because all of it was causing so much damage in my life. I mean, I single-handedly destroyed my entire life using cocaine.
Wow.
And like I said, alcohol was just along for the ride.
Gotcha. I mean, I personally have never done cocaine, but I'm going to assume that it's pretty corrosive, just like any other substance over time. Seems as though you certainly got to your breaking point. Was there a specific moment or event that happened for you that caused you to say, you know what, Vasavi, I got to just really get my handle on this thing here, or, we're going to be in real deep, SHIT?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I went to rehab, I was 36 and I ran out of money completely. And it was just, I was in this relationship. I had just had a miscarriage. I mean, it was a lot of stuff going on in my life at that time, and I had nothing left. I felt like I had nothing left. And my sister flew in from the East Coast. My aunt flew in from the East Coast, and in a way, it's like I had to go to rehab at that point because I had nothing. And I knew I needed to break up with this boyfriend that was just awfully toxic for me. But the second time I went to rehab, that was the second, and I promised myself it was going to be the last time. I remember this moment, Ray. I was in the kitchen arguing with my mother about taking a drug test because she knew I was back on drugs again. She could tell that I was using cocaine again. I was sniffling. I was irritable. I was moody. One minute I was high. Next minute I was just crashing. And I was in the kitchen. I was 37 at that point, and arguing with my mother, negotiating with my mother, and telling her how she should trust me more and all this stuff, knowing damn well that she was absolutely right and I needed a drug test. But I hung up on my mother and I said this out loud in my kitchen, and I said, the chaos has to stop. And I decided. So unlike the first time that I went to rehab because it was my family who was kind of pushing for it, the second time I went to rehab, it was because of me. I said, I'm never going through this again. I'm not doing this again. I'm going to go to rehab again, and I'm never going to go back again. That was my promise to myself. And that's because I chose to. No one forced me to. I was sick of the chaos.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly been there, and I feel you on that 100%. The pressure that you were feeling the first time around when you went to rehab, was that in large part being driven by your family, or were there other outside factors that were causing you to feel that pressure to go the first time around versus the second time where you were just kind of more true to yourself?
When I look back on it now, it seems so long ago. It's like I knew I needed the help. I knew it, but I was so clinging on to the status of everything. I had my car, I had my apartment, and I had clients, and I had this boyfriend, and I had this life that I had built. In my mind, it's like, but I built this life. How could I just give it all up and go across the country? I had to go back to the East Coast to go to rehab. I mean, there were, other than my family, I knew I had to go, but I was in a very dark place. And it was like the only way that I was going to get on that plane and go is if someone manhandles me to go. And my sister, my older sister, who I respect very much, we're very close. She's my best friend in the entire world. I just couldn't stand to look at her and give her a hard time. I didn't want to give her a hard time. So it really was largely in part my family the first time that I went to rehab. Nothing else really outside of that.
Let's take a quick break.
Having been in therapy since the age of 12, I know firsthand just how powerful the process of finding the right therapist is. Going to therapy and talking things out with my therapist has made me happier, clearer, and most importantly, I have a plan for my mental health. I have tools to be able to communicate with others and also the tools to cope when life gets hard, which it does. So let me ask you a question. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who is going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with the therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp, HELP.com/Vasavi. That's betterhelp.com/Vasavi. Clicking that link helps support this podcast, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with the therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing out about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I don't know where I would be without the help of therapy and my therapist, but I do know that life would feel that much harder. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Vasavi. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this podcast.
And then the second time, what role did family play in that, if any? It sounds like you have an extremely supportive family, which is fantastic. Yeah. Curious what that looked like the second time around for you, because I've spoken to a lot of folks and who've been in and out of rehab detox centers, and it's sometimes the family kind of runs out of the patience or the belief, so to speak. I'm curious what your experience was the second time around.
Second time around, my mother was very hands off. Both my parents were like, "You're going to go, and that's that. We're going to be here to support you emotionally. If you need anything financially, we'll help you." My mom supported me financially for 6 months after I got out of rehab. It was a very low period in my life. I felt so small. I felt like a piece of nothing because I was at 37 years old, my mother needing to financially take care of me. It was not a good look for me. It did not feel good. But they had really a hands-off approach. My mother said, "I'm going to leave it up to God at this point." She goes, "Because I can't control you." So they did not play. I mean, they obviously played a role. Like, they didn't leave my life, but my journey to learning how to love myself again, the second time I went to rehab, was on me. Then my parents really had a hands-off approach because they realized that this was a problem bigger than them. This wasn't something that they could control.
Got you. So you're 37 years old, you enter rehab the second time, and what did that look like for you? What did the process of rehab look like for you this second time around versus the first time? And then how did you start going about putting your life together upon exiting rehab? Because I think that from the outside looking in, that's where things really started to become crystal clear for you, and you starting to step into this very, very unique approach that you have at developing oneself. What did your process look like, from that point on?
So the first time I went to rehab, I was very resistant. Even though I was still resistant in rehab. And I knew that I was resistant because every day when I was in rehab, I would call my boyfriend. And he was using drugs. He was cheating on me. I thought we were still together. I thought, I'm going to get healthy and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to make this relationship work. And I was so convinced that I would make this relationship work.
You think you were going to change him too?
Oh, hell yeah, I did. Of course I thought I did. Of course I'm going to change, and then he's going to change for me, right? That's how powerful I thought I was. Second time, it was like I was in another relationship. In my second time I went to rehab, I was actually engaged to somebody else.
Okay.
So that's another thing. It shows you right there. It was very hard for me to stay single. I didn't stay single for very long. I always had a drug, or I always had a man, or I had something in the place of God for me. So upon the exit strategy, my exit strategy was really, if I tell you, you might laugh, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I remember getting out of rehab and I did intensive outpatient. I did I did residential therapy, residential rehab. So I was staying in the house. And then after that, I said, I'm not going to stay in the rehab facility anymore the second time. I want to get healthy and I want to live under my own roof. So my counselors agreed to that. My parents agreed to that. And I said, I promise you, I'm going to do things right this way, this next time around. And I remember, Ray, Googling, how do I begin to love myself? That was literally the first thing that I Googled, is how do I begin to love myself? That really required humility on my part, and that required me putting my pride aside, because I realized at that point, I had no idea how to love myself. I thought that money meant that I loved myself. I thought a nice car meant that I loved myself. I thought having nice clothes and having a ton of clients and doing tons of podcast interviews like this meant that, oh, I'm doing something right. I'm on the right track. But I had no idea how to actually love and respect myself. So that was the first thing that I did upon leaving rehab and being an intensive outpatient from my house. And like I said, I made the decision to go the second time. So I was gung ho. And when I make up my mind to do something, nobody can stop me. So that was the biggest difference between the first and second time. First time I went, it was like, I begrudgingly went. And I was like, my attitude about it was super shitty. It was just very much like, okay, I'm just going to go because everyone's telling me to go.
Right.
Second time I went to rehab, it was my choice. And so nothing and no one could get in my way, which is what I attribute being 5 years sober from cocaine. I mean, it's because I chose to stop. I chose to stop the chaos.
No, I love that. I think you referenced that in your book when you talk about your morning elixir. Is that the kind of the same moment where you started identifying the?
Yes, I started drinking my morning elixir, my water with lemon juice and a little bit of sea salt, and that was like, I thought it was so silly. That this is what I'm doing to love myself, a morning elixir. Like at the time, I thought it was silly. Of course, I write about it in my book because now I see the value of just taking that added step for myself, even if it means putting a little Himalayan sea salt in my water. That for me was an act of love. It was an act of love for me to make my water, to make my morning elixir. I had to learn how to love myself, even in the simplest of ways, even in the ways that it felt silly for me.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When you started moving into that in the book, I was like, oh, what is she going to talk about now? And she just brought up this morning elixir. So I love that, because I feel like a lot of folks, particularly those who who struggle from substances, who are coming from these really dark places, it's almost like an extra 3 or 4 steps that they need to take to get to a baseline where they can start implementing productive techniques into their lives, where they can start living a new life. So in reading your book, and I know that your book isn't specifically geared towards those who are in recovery, but that's kind of the lens that I was, kind of reading it through. And so one of the questions I had for you was, what's the entry point for someone who is coming from such dark days into a lot of the work you do, that you talk about in the book? And then we can get deeper into the book from there.
Yeah, I would say the entryway is to first acknowledge and admit that you might have a problem. The hardest thing for me to do was to admit that I had a problem and that I needed help. That's always the hardest part for people. And so that's what I recommend as the entryway for people.
Cool. So you obviously were the student for quite some time, right? Before you became the teacher. So from the moment where you've now identified that, the morning elixir is going to be a small token of love and appreciation that I can show myself, what then do you do from that point on to continue to kind of build out your toolkit and start shifting the proverbial momentum in your life into this space of self-love before you can then start passing that on to others?
Well, I just want to say this. What's interesting about my life is that I was teaching for a very long time too. See, I was a licensed therapist and a coach even before I ran into these issues. Gotcha. So I was a licensed therapist and a coach from the age of 28 years old. And based on the timeline I've given you, at 36 is when I went to rehab. So we're talking about 8 years of my life I was preaching and teaching, but I was not following my own advice.
Gotcha.
So I was doing a very good job of helping other people, leading the way for other people, but I myself was not taking my own advice. And I was being led by things outside of myself rather than being led from within myself.
Did you feel hypocritical in those years?
Absolutely. There was, my God, in the depth of my addiction, I would have like maybe 10 clients in a day, and then I would buy a bag of cocaine at the end of the night. So I damn well knew what I was doing was wrong. However, I was dating somebody at the time who, really brainwashed me and said to me, well, what you do on your private time is private. It's nobody's business. But I knew that was wrong. Like, I knew fundamentally that was wrong for me, at least. I don't feel right preaching one thing and then having this closet addiction. I didn't feel right about it. And I had so much shame around it. It was very hard for me to seek that help, because here I was in this position of like authority and helping people. And here I was struggling the hardest, and the addiction just got worse and worse and worse. I went from 1 day a week to 3 days a week to 5 days a week using cocaine until I could no longer manage that. So
Yeah.
I definitely felt extremely hypocritical, which is why now I sing it from the mountaintops. You know what I mean? Which is, I think, if you even listen to podcast episodes that I did years ago compared to now, it's a night and day difference. I'm still saying the same thing. My message has always stayed the same. It's always been about talking to yourself in a kind way, paying attention to how you speak to yourself, loving yourself, caring for yourself, having perspective and compassion for yourself. I've been saying this for years, but I myself was not practicing it. So you can even just hear a difference in my delivery when I delivered my message years ago versus now. So that just shows what a night and day difference it is when you actually start to practice what you preach.
Yeah. And for you, like actually stepping into that authentic self that you had been talking about for so many years previously.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself in a position where you had to go back and reconcile all of those years of of teaching the right, the gospel, so to speak, but not necessarily living it? Did you have to go back and reconcile that with folks that you had worked with? What did that? Because I know that a lot of folks, who come out of addiction carry a bunch of shame, carry a bunch of guilt, and for you, you're very much moving people around in their own lives. That's a huge degree of power. Did you have to go back to reconcile that with folks once they started to catch wind of of more of who you actually were?
What's so funny is that I had to make amends. I made amends, and I had a client. Her name is Tanya. And she said to me, Vas, I had no idea that you were struggling so much. You were still the best damn coach I ever hired.
All
and
right.
it was just really funny. I was just like, man, these are the kind of great people I get to work with. But I went back and I apologized to every client that I could think of that I had worked with during that time. And everyone was very forgiving. Very forgiving. And even when I got out of rehab, I wrote this long Facebook post and I was very open about my journey, even after I got out of rehab. So I think in being transparent like that out loud, people started to trust me again because I wasn't hiding it. You know what I mean? I wasn't in a place of hiding what I had gone through. I was openly sharing it. And I definitely went back and I made amends. And it wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. I love to hear that, that folks, not only were they understanding, but accepting and continue to be supportive of you. And obviously, if you're the best damn coach, even in your darkest days, I can only imagine what you're doing these days.
I'm pretty damn good, I'll tell you that. But it's different. It's different. I coach from a very different place. I have a lot more understanding. I give myself a lot more grace, and so I think that shines through when I'm working with my clients. And because I've released a lot of the shame that I have also around those days in my life, so that makes me a better coach. I can work with people and I can meet them a lot better where they're at.
Awesome. Let's talk about your coaching for a second. I know that you do individual coaching. You also do group coaching. Mm-hmm. What is the philosophy that one should expect in working with you that they may not necessarily know by reading your book?
My philosophy is this: that shame shrivels when we say it out loud. When we actually say the thing to whatever it is that we've been wanting to say to a person, your shame will shrivel. And so that's my philosophy. So with all my clients, whether they're working with me one-on-one, whether we're in a group, everyone knows that when they work with me or they're in one of my groups, that they are going to be speaking, because that is the quickest way to shrivel that shame.
Mm. I find that that shame is something, like I said earlier, that folks, particularly with substance issues, just have to deal with on a daily basis. It's so deeply, at least for me, it's like so deeply rooted in a lot of the things that I do or don't do. And when I was reading your book, one of the things that I was thinking about is even the act of saying something out loud to yourself, how challenging it is just to get over that initial hurdle of, changing how you speak with someone. Right. And, so one of the questions that I was thinking about was, we obviously are constantly having this self-talk. We're constantly having this dialogue behind, closed doors, so to speak, with ourselves, right? Where it's not out loud. It's in our own minds. It's probably largely being driven by ego. Why is it so hard for us to cross that threshold and that hurdle to stand in front of the mirror and say, hey, Ray, this is what we're going to do next, regardless of like how I'm talking to myself, maybe a little softer, maybe a little bit more stern, but just the out loud portion of it, I think, is so hard to do. Why is that the case? Because it's effectively the same conversation, just kind of in a different venue, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say this. It's like you can't unhear yourself, right? It keeps you honest.
Yeah.
When I look in front of the mirror and I say to myself, Vas, we need to make a change. I can't unhear that anymore, but I could say it in my mind, Vas, we need to make a change. We need to make a change. But I'm not hearing myself say it. There's something that happens in the brain when you actually hear yourself and your voice saying it. It's like you can't unhear it. You can't hide from it anymore. You have to confront the truth. So it becomes a lot easier to not only confront, but to also take action when you say that out loud. And you bonus points if you look in front of the mirror and you say it out loud.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like honesty is such a huge component of one's healing, and just first and foremost being honest with oneself. Saying it out loud, to your point, you can't escape that. You can't run away from it, right? I think the second step is then going from saying things out loud to yourself to now saying things out loud to other people, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're in a relationship, whether it's at your workplace or or somewhere recreationally. Making that next transition in saying it to other folks with all of the baggage that comes with, maybe not wanting to be as open and as honest with individuals in the past. What's your suggestion for folks who are trying to cross that threshold?
So I'm obviously going to say work with me one-on-one or join one of my groups, because the next step after you say it out loud to yourself is to say it in front of other people and to be witnessed. But the other option that you can do, let's say you don't work with me one-on-one and you don't join one of my groups, is to role play with yourself. Like, do you know how many conversations I've had to have in my life where before I even have the conversation with the person, I am like role playing with myself what I want to say, and I'm wetting my own whistle. I'm building that muscle memory, that speech memory, so I can hear myself say the thing that I want to say. Because it's a lot easier to be like, oh shit, I should have said this out loud. I should have said that, but then you don't. But in those moments, you can practice with yourself. Well, what do I want to say? What's the thing that this person needs to hear? And instead of keeping it inside, write it out. Practice saying it out loud, role play with a friend, so that when you're actually in front of this person that you want to say it with, it's not like the first time that you've said it out loud.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. It's just like if you're, an athlete, and it's the repetition, it's going through those reps so that once you get to the game time, you've done it 1,000 times and it has a little bit less sting to it, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that makes total sense. There was another portion in your book that you touched on where it was, and there's tons of really great prompts in the book and exercises in the book. But one of them that really hit home for me is where you start talking about aspects that one is trying to hide, and the hidden self. Can you talk a little bit about that and how ultimately that can be rolled up into one being honest with oneself?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Ray. We all have many different parts of us that we don't allow the world to see, parts of us that we don't even allow the people closest to us to experience. And so I think that it's really important in learning to integrate all these different parts of ourselves. It keeps us honest. Instead of keeping these parts hidden, we bring those parts of us out into the light, and we have to acknowledge it for ourselves. So for example, I have a client right now who hasn't felt sexy in a while. Okay, she hasn't felt sexy in a while, new divorce, single mom. She's not feeling herself lately. And she's like, I can be really sexy when I want to be. And I was like, all right, well, let's see it. And she was like, well, no, she's like, I just, I'm not dating anyone, and I was like, so what? You don't need to be dating someone to bring this part of you out there. And so just in her having this conversation with me, it kept her honest about the fact that she has these parts of herself that she's kept hidden because, she's not dating or she's feeling crappy about herself because she's divorced. And so when you're honest about these hidden parts of yourself and you actually choose to give it a voice, you keep yourself more honest.
No,
Yeah.
that makes total sense. When you think about someone who's in recovery, whether they're early days, maybe they have a little bit longer term recovery, what are some of the things that you would suggest to them from a tool perspective, so that they can lean further into their own development? Because I feel like a lot of the tools that you lay out in this book make a ton of sense, but I feel like as an addict, it's hard for us to be able to tap in and give ourselves the license to be able to step in to some of these tools. What are kind of like the lower hanging of the fruits that we can get our hands around to maybe have that first, moment of self-love that you had on your own?
The one question that I still to this day ask myself is, what am I telling myself about this situation? Listen, when you get out of rehab, or when you realize that you have a problem and you want to make a change, it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy. All of a sudden, things are going to be daffodils and tulips. It's not. So you got to really keep your attitude in check. And it's very easy to have a crappy attitude when you're newly in recovery, because it's like, we don't have our drug of choice. We don't have you may be out of a breakup. Maybe you just got out of a codependent relationship. It can be really easy to slip into a dark place. And so the question, you can always ask yourself this question: what am I telling myself about this situation? Whatever it is that you're going through, what am I telling myself? And from there, you can ask yourself, is this true? Is this something that I want to continue to believe? Is this helpful? Is this harmful? So we have the power, even if you can't buy the book or you don't listen to the podcast or whatever, you can always challenge your own thoughts. And you can ask yourself the question, what am I saying to myself right now? And you can start to, in the microest of ways and smallest of ways, you can start to tweak the way that you speak to yourself. You can start to tweak the way that you think about things so that you start to gain a fresher perspective on things.
Yep. I love that, and it further reinforces being able to say that a lot. I feel like someone who's coming from a position where the addict mind is oftentimes clouded with misdirection. Getting it out of the mind and into the open can help you with getting a little bit more of that direction that we're all that clarity, frankly, that we're all seeing. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's STACKNDAYS.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation. From the standpoint of, and I've asked this of a few different guests, and you play all of these hats. Where does being a coach and being a therapist begin, or maybe the other way around? Like, what's your perspective on the role that you play for a client in each of those kind of categories?
I love to be my client's cheerleader. I love to help them see things. I love to be their mirror. I love to be a friend. I think a lot of people are feeling very lonely these days, and they don't feel like they can trust people. So I have instant connection with my clients. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working with me. But my role for them is really a confidant. It's as an advisor, and it's as a mentor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. There was a line that you called out. I think it was on the back of Matthew McConaughey acceptance speech, where he talks about looking forward and needing a hero, every day when he wakes up that he can strive towards. And you were mentioning that your hero is yourself, and you're oftentimes projecting 10 years out as to that being the version of you that you're aspiring to be. I'm curious that at this stage of your life, you've obviously been through a ton. You've overcome a ton. Who is the hero that you're looking to in 10 years from now? And what does that version of you look like, considering you've accomplished so much up until now?
Thank you for saying that. Well, she's definitely married again. She's definitely married again. No kids. I've never wanted children, but I will be happily married, and we will be traveling, and we will be enjoying our life. I will continue doing the work that I do. It may look a little different. Maybe it's not one-on-one. Maybe it's just group, and I'm still doing the work that I'm doing here. But I definitely see myself in a new relationship. I've stayed single for quite a bit now, because I knew that was part of my self-love was to be single and to not constantly rely on another human being. to make me feel good. I needed to get to a place where I felt good from within. And I really feel that way now. I really feel happy and content from within without having another person. But 10 years from now, I would love to be in a new relationship with someone who truly sees me and gets me. I don't think I've ever had that. I've never had that. No.
I love that. I mean, and I love the fact that you clearly have had a paradigm shift on what relationship companionship can look like and should look like, for you, which is great to hear.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself in moments even today where you're struggling and maybe you have to, implement some of your own teachings? Maybe there are teachings from the outside that you hold on to. Like, what does it look like for someone who lives in the space of developing other people, having to develop oneself? Like, what are your tools that you turn to today?
I mean, it's the same thing that I tell other people. Just 2 days ago, I was in a massive shame spiral. I was PMSing. I was hormonal. This was on, what's today? Today's Tuesday. So this was on Saturday. So just a few days ago, I was in a shame spiral for about an hour. I was just feeling really moody, really irritable. I'm not doing enough. I'm inadequate. I was feeling all sorts of feelings and I just had to stop. And I said out loud, I literally said, "Oh my God, stop. You're hormonal right now. Don't believe a word that your mind is telling you. Don't believe a word that your mind is telling you, Vas." And I just talked myself through it. That's what I do. I talk myself through challenging situations, just like I would be there for somebody else to help talk somebody through a situation. I talk myself through the situation. But just a few days ago, I was in a shame spiral.
So you're basically your best friend at this point, right?
I am 1,000%. I don't know a better friend for me than me. I have two very best friends. They are my best friends, but I am still my best friend. 100%. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like sometimes it's hard for people to get to that point where they are their own best friend, because there's like this negative stigma associated with, I guess the word is selfish, right? Like when you're focused on yourself so much so that, you're seemingly to the outside looking in, disregarding everybody else. I feel like that's like a really hard, place to get when you're so accustomed to trying to make other people feel good about themselves. Like, what does that paradigm shift even look like? And how do you make that when you're in this like toxic spiral of like pleasing other folks and, putting yourself second, maybe to your friends, your community, your family, so on and so forth?
Here's how I see it, Ray. It's more selfish for me to not love myself. It's more selfish for me because if I don't love myself and I don't think highly of myself and I'm not my own best friend, I'm going to be miserable. And guess who's going to be on the receiving end of that? Everybody around me. That's the most selfish thing you can do. The most selfish thing you can do is not love yourself and to not be your own best friend. Because if you do not know how to treat yourself with the utmost respect, compassion, and dignity and honor, how can you give that to anybody else? So I actually, people can think whatever they want, but until you actually get in my space, you'll never really know what it's like to be around me. So people can assume all that they want, but I think that's not my problem.
I love that.
It's not my problem. It's really not, because I know who I am. I know who I am and I know what I bring to the table and I know what a kind person I am. And if someone's going to look at me and think that I'm selfish because I'm into myself or because I really respect myself, then you haven't gotten to know me. You obviously don't know me.
No. I love that.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. I feel like it's important for people to get over that threshold of, of constantly putting what other people are going and how they're going to view them before how one views themselves. I think it's super important, and it's just as hard as like saying things out loud.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I've gone through my own process of trying to be able to do that more consistently, and again, I think that when you start saying a lot of these things out loud, they tend to lose their internal sting, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I think when we actually give ourselves the permission to say it out loud, and here's the thing, it's going to be hard to say it to other people at first. That's why I recommend in the book that you got to say it to yourself. This is about you and you. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's the relationship that you have with you and you, the words that you speak to yourself. Nobody can hear those but you. So you got to make sure that how you're speaking to yourself is kindly. And that doesn't mean that you let yourself, I think people think when I say be kind to yourself, that doesn't mean that you're coddling yourself. It doesn't mean that you're letting yourself get away with things. It means that you talk to yourself the way that you want to be treated. Period. How do you want to be spoken to? Think about it. Think about the patience that you would want someone to give you. Think about the understanding that you'd want someone to give you. I'm just inviting people to give that to themselves and just watch how your life will change.
No. I think that's super, super valuable. And I think it's a great perspective to have. And ultimately, what you expect of yourself, you're in turn going to expect that of others, right? So, how are folks treating you from the outside in? How are they providing spaces for you that are safe? I mean, you obviously have to provide those for yourself, first before you know how to even look for anything like that in somebody else, right?
Look, when I think about my group, Say It Out Loud, I know how to create a safe space because I know what safety feels like. I know what it's like for me to feel safe. I've been through so much group therapy in my life as a patient, not as a therapist. I've gone through so much group therapy, so many group meetings. I know, recovery circles. I know what safety feels like. And I also know what safety does not feel like. I didn't grow up in an emotionally safe household. It was not emotionally safe for me to tell my mother things. We'd get beaten if we did things that she didn't approve of. So I know exactly the kind of environment that will foster suppression. And I also have had the experience of being in an environment that fosters safety. So I know what I need. And so I infuse those in my group because that's what I know people will need to feel safe to say it out loud.
What do you think the biggest mistake people often make for themselves in not creating a safe environment for themselves to have that honest conversation with themselves?
They're not making a safe environment for themselves, and they keep trying to seek safety in unsafe people. If you really knew what safety felt like within yourself, if you built that safety within yourself, I bet you half the people that you hang out with would be gone. You'd see that the people that you hang out with, or you're just hanging out with them because it's familiar. You'll see that you don't actually feel safe around them, but you're just used to it. The nervous system would rather deal with a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven. So it's like, I think we keep going towards people, and that's the mistake people make. It's like we keep going towards people for external validation, for things that we should be giving to ourselves. So that's a mistake that happens when we don't cultivate safety within ourselves. We will try to find safety in other people, and quite frankly, people that are not qualified to give that to you.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. I think that I don't think I was in a space to be able to hear that in my early days of sobriety, but I think that once you're able to kind of clear some of the noise and get some clarity, something like that really resonates, right? Because at a certain point, you have to audit your life, right? You have to audit the folks who are around you. You have to audit the spaces, the people, the places. And I think that's where that honest conversation comes into play to decipher between, is this in fact supporting me? Is it holding me? Or is it ultimately letting me down? Am I allowing it to do so?
Yeah.
A couple questions before we take this thing in here. One, you are obviously an extremely, strong person, right? You have, well thought out opinions on how you move through the world. And so my question for you is, how would someone today know that you are struggling? If you happen to be struggling without you explicitly telling them so? Because I know that I don't know you, prior to this conversation, but it seems as though that you present yourself in a way where you are the strong one, right? So, and oftentimes people miss those signals coming from the strong ones. So how would someone know that you're struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them so?
Honestly, I would tell them so.
Okay.
I don't want to lie about this, you don't have to mind read with me. I will straight up tell you I'm not doing well right now. I had a girlfriend message me yesterday and she goes, "Hey, you want to talk on the phone?" I said, "I'm not really feeling it right now." I wasn't feeling it. I'm hormonal. I did not want to do anything. I just wanted to watch my movie. I didn't want to get on the phone. So I don't avoid things. If someone asks me a question, I'm going to be straight up with you and just tell you the deal. Just like I told you when I had to reschedule this call and I told you exactly what was up. Yep. I was struggling that day. I was like, I had 6 calls back to back. I could not do this call on top of that. So you will know from me. There will be no secret because I don't believe in making people have to read my mind. I don't think that's fair to people. I think it's our responsibility to say if we need help. So that's that's how you would know. I would tell you.
How would it have looked 10 years ago?
Oh, I would just tell you, I would only give you the highlight reel of my life. I remember that was the biggest issue that my sister had with me, my older sister. She would say to me, anytime I ask you how you're doing, you tell me all that you've done. She goes, you don't ever tell me how you're feeling. So that was a big difference for me. I would go into my list of accomplishments and how much money I've made and how many new clients I signed rather than telling you how I'm really feeling. So that's a big change for me.
Was that a smoke and mirror for you, or was that a smoke and mirror for like your audience?
Both. Definitely both, because as long as I was doing good on the outside, then I didn't really have any issues, in my own mind.
Your sister, are you guys close in age?
She's 4 years older than me.
She's 4 years old. She sounds like she's been a fantastic, ally and friend for you.
She is literally. I mean, when we were younger, obviously we fought because I was a younger one. I was always being compared to her, so I was always irritated by her, and she was always irritated by me because I got away with so much, being the youngest in the family. But we talk every day. She's the only person who can call me at 6:45 a.m. in the morning, and I will pick up. She's the only person. I'll be recording a podcast and interview or an episode. And my sister will call me and I'll be like, hold on one second. No, I love her so much. You don't understand. She used to play the role of mother for me, but as we got older, we didn't want to play that. I didn't want her to play that role anymore. I already have a mother. I wanted a sister. And so we're in a season of really looking at what does that mean for us to be sisters? Like she just came to visit me back in November here in Austin, Texas. We had the best time. I just went to go visit her in Philly with her family and I saw my mother and father too. We had the best time. She's a great ally. So thank you for recognizing her.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. I feel like oftentimes people feel as though that they're alone in their journey, whether you struggle from substances or not. I feel like people feel like they're alone, and to be able to turn to someone like sounds like what you have in your sister is so important when we're a little bit lost and we're kind of grasping for direction and support. So I just love to hear that I have, I've got siblings of my own, and every once in a while, when I have to have a conversation with someone that I just don't know if I can have with anybody else, I'll reach out to my sister because we've been, through it since, she's 2 years younger than I am. So, we've been through it since we were toddlers, basically, so there's just a degree of like knowledge that somebody else can have of you that, no one else can really have because of like, that history. Yeah. So
whenever we talk about our mother, we know exactly what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like there is that level of familiarity and childhood upbringing that only she's the only person on the planet who will understand.
No, I love that. Last question I have for you is, for someone who's sitting there and, they're looking for ways to really open their lives back up. They're looking for ways to turn the corner on their addiction, but even more so than just turning the corner on addiction, but stepping into their own power. But they have no idea what that first step is going to be. What would you suggest to that person?
I want you to remember that it's going to get better. It really is. Sometimes without the thing that we've been holding on to for so long, we can feel like our life is going to be boring. It's going to be uneventful, that we're not going to have any fun. But I can say this now, having thought that cocaine was my medicine. I used to call cocaine my medicine. And I really relied heavily on it back in the day. And now having not used it at all for 5 years, everything I ever wanted in life has come to me because I stopped doing stupid shit. Yeah. Period. So it's like you can have anything you want. You got to stop doing the stuff that's hurting you. I remember having a conversation with God, and I remember hearing these words, Vasavi, I'll give you anything you want, but you need to learn how to love yourself. And I'm not going to give you everything that you want until I know that you fully love yourself. And I remember hearing those words, and I just making that my mission. It's like asking myself, is this an act of love? Is this an act of love? Is speaking to myself in this way an act of love? So for that person listening, I just want you to remember that it does get better, but you got to listen to yourself and you got to do what's right for you. Yep. And you got to do right by you. It's not even what's right for you, but you treat yourself with that respect. Start with that. Like, is this what a self-respecting person would do? And it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard conversation to have with yourself because you're probably going to find out that you haven't been treating yourself with respect, but at least you can start somewhere. You can start by having that conversation and by being honest with yourself. That in and of itself is just as good.
Yeah, I think that the point of acknowledgement is so powerful we have them, over, many times over the course of our lives. It's just a matter of at what point in time are we willing to start listening to that and acting on that very, very true acknowledgement that one's having with oneself. You mentioned this voice of God. Do you decipher between the conversation you're having with yourself and that voice and the voice that you hear of God speaking to you?
Yes, I can distinguish it. There's usually there's the inquisitive, curious Vasavi, and then when I speak to God and then I hear a voice back, and it's usually very instructive and directional. It'll just tell me what to do. It'll just speak to me in a very firm, gentle kind of way, and that's the voice of God for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell us where folks can find you post our conversation.
Yes, you can go to my website at vasavikumar.com. You can also find me on Instagram, and my handle is my name is Vasavi. Send me a voice note. Let me know that you love this episode.
Vasavi, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to find some time to sit down. I know that you're extremely busy, and you wouldn't do this if you didn't want to make the time to do it.
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
You're very clear. So thank you so much. And I'm going to continue to follow you. And if you have any more books coming down the pipe, I can't wait to read that as well.
Thank you so much, Ray.
You're welcome.
If you love today's episode, then say it out loud. Subscribe, leave a review, and come say hi over on Instagram at My Name is Vasavi. Until next time, say it out loud.